Welcome back to From Middle Class to Millions. I'm Shannon Brome-Ward, and today we're talking about something that has been heavy on my heart for a while, and I've been seeing this a lot more and more lately for some reason, and I want to talk about it. And it's about the conversations that we're having in our homes about money right now. The conversations that you've had in your home when your kids were younger, the conversations you had in your home when you were growing up. And I want to really hone in on not only the conversations that you're having, but the conversations that you're having in front of your daughters. Because if you think that your kids aren't paying attention, you're sadly mistaken. They are listening. They're listening to every single word. So let's dive into this. Okay, first I'm going to take you back, give you a little bit of background for those of you who don't know about my background and my childhood. I want to set the stage for you a little bit so that you get an understanding of where I'm coming from, why I talk so much about money, and why this, especially with daughters, is so important to me, not only because obviously I am a daughter, but because I see so much of this with women that work with me, that women who talk to me. I see it all the time, every day, everywhere, whether you are working with me as a money coach, whether you're a friend of mine, whether you're a relative, whether you're a business acquaintance. I hear about this all the time. And I think it's so important because these conversations start at home. And if you are a mother, an aunt, a grandmother, whatever, a cousin, if you are in the presence of other women, particularly young women, I just want to bring some awareness to what we're saying around women, about money. Okay? So, like I said, a little bit of background. For those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. And my parents were immigrants. So they immigrated from Barbados to Toronto. And they got there, and it was like a particular wave of immigration at the time when they were looking for certain skilled workers. And because Barbados is a part of the Commonwealth, and Canada, of course, is a part of the Commonwealth, they had this agreement, particularly in the Caribbean, to bring these skilled workers from the Caribbean to Canada. And this was another wave, whereas my parents' older siblings went off to England. And then from England, some of them went to the States, or some of them went directly to the States. So it was this kind of circuitous route to get out of the island and to go where there were opportunities. Like any immigrant, you're going seeking opportunities. Now, I have since moved to the United States, so I too am an immigrant. And I immigrated from Canada to the United States. I moved here to go to graduate school, and I'm now a U.S. citizen. I have dual citizenship. All right? So just giving you that context. And at this time in the U.S., being an immigrant means a lot of things, right? We're experiencing a whole new perspective that's being voiced very loudly about immigration in this country. So my parents, like I said, immigrated to Canada. And for the most part, people immigrate for opportunities, right? My parents were raised poor, and with that particular poverty mindset came a scarcity mindset. And it didn't just, they got to Canada, they got jobs, they worked, they bought a home. It didn't shed that mindset just because they were now moving into the middle class and had secured themselves in the middle class. No, that mindset came right along with them. It was like luggage, it was like baggage, it was like a backpack that they were carrying with them throughout life. And that was clearly known in our household by the things that they said around money. Now, I want to be clear. I did not grow up poor. Not at all. I grew up solidly in the middle class. There was no housing insecurity, food insecurity. Never once were the lights turned off. Whatever, like none of that. However, I was raised by people who did, in fact, grow up poor. And so, although I didn't experience poverty, I experienced it through their mindset. So, my parents were very clear that with the language that they used to kind of prevent themselves from feeling too comfortable. So they would say things like, I'm broke. They were never broke. Had never been broke. Not in my lifetime, at least. They were never broke. They would often say, that's too expensive. We can't afford that. You know, the whole language of like, do you think money grows on trees? Like there was a lot of anything about money was very restrictive. And I really believe that, now this isn't their words, but I really believe that these phrases that they were saying was sort of like a defense mechanism. It was to prevent them from becoming too comfortable. Because if you got too comfortable, if you rested on your laurels, if you took your eyes off the prize for a second, you could slip back into poverty. And I really feel that that was a fear of theirs. And it's understandable, right? I mean, nobody aspires to be poor. Nobody wants to remain poor. Nobody wants to be poor. And so everybody wants to have their basic needs met, and they should have their basic needs met. And I personally believe beyond your basic needs. But I digress, that's for another conversation. I think because my parents were so afraid that this sense of security that they were trying to build for themselves was based solely on something that they weren't familiar with or comfortable with, they ingrained and programmed in me that money was fleeting and that financial security, you could get there, but don't ever believe that you could remain there. And I think that like really breeds this fear and this perpetual feeling of struggle, of insecurity, of lack of safety. And that's something that I had to shake and really work through, even though I didn't grow up with financial insecurity. I grew up with the programming of financial insecurity. And listen, my parents did the best that they could with what they knew, right? They really believed in education. They were staunch supporters of that. They believed that if you got a good education, you got a good job, that was the answer to everything. And quite honestly, for their generation, in many ways, it was. Right? If you got a good education, you got a good job, you could buy a home, you could work until you're 65, you could retire, great. Like all of the things would kind of line up for you if you followed that plan. And they taught that plan. They taught that plan. They encouraged that plan because that was the plan that you could utilize to make money. But it was always contingent on the fact that you had to continue to show up. You had to continue to work. You had to do that until you hit whatever the traditional retirement age is, or was at that time, which was 65. They didn't talk about investing. They didn't, ever utter the words compound interest. They didn't talk about building wealth. They knew about saving and buying a home, but that's pretty much where it ended. And money was uncomfortable. It just wasn't talked about. It was very private. I didn't know when I was younger how much my parents made. I think I probably found out. I don't even know if they actually told me because that too was a secret. It wasn't discussed openly. And I think that, their fear of becoming impoverished again kind of forced them to focus on keeping their head above water, comfortably above water, however they defined comfortably, comfortable, and it didn't allow for abundance. So all of the things about money and wealth building and investing and all of that, I had to learn by myself. And more importantly, I had to unlearn all of those decades of scarcity programming at the same time. So I'm learning how to make money, how to make my money grow, how to invest, and all of that while trying to unlearn and shake money scarcity, feeling that money was finite. And that's tough, right? I mean, that's not easy. That is not easy. And I'm grateful to my parents for providing the foundation, right? Because yes, to some degree, they fostered getting an education, and that was important. And yes, we know statistically, people with an undergraduate degree earn significantly more than folks who don't have a degree. And I don't know, maybe the tables are turning for that now, but at that time, that was truly the case. This wasn't some fabrication in their mind. This is actually what was happening. So it made sense. And I get it. And I am so grateful for them to lay that foundation for me. And I'm also grateful to them for not having gendered roles around money. So we weren't a household where, only my dad worked, or only my dad made the money and handled the money, whereas my mom was a stay-at-home mom, or didn't know anything about money, or just managed the children, or just managed the household. No, there was a lot of shared responsibilities and roles. There were some things that were still quite traditional. I'm not going to say they were just really liberal and ahead of their time. No. But when it came to money, they didn't have very gendered roles. And when it came to finances, they partnered way more than I think any of the other roles that they had. And I think this was a gift to me, because it meant that I didn't grow up believing that money was for men and for men only, and the man was the one who was supposed to handle money. And a lot of women did, and a lot of women still do. And so this is why now I think that this conversation is so important, because let's fast forward to my life today. I have sons, right? I have sons. So why is it so important for me to talking about money to your daughters? I think it's because of what I've seen, right? What I've seen with my clientele and what the figures and the facts tell me. Even, we're talking about money, but money involves numbers. It involves a lot of emotion, a lot of behaviors, but it also involves numbers. And some of these numbers, these facts and figures, just do not lie. All right? I wanted to make sure a couple of things. For my children, for myself, I wanted my sons to know that, just like I knew, money wasn't just a man's responsibility, right? It wasn't solely the responsibility of the man to understand how money works. I'm not talking about providing. I'm not talking about, if you have certain beliefs about who's the head of the household. I'm talking about understanding how money works, being a participant, an active participant, and a decision maker in what happens with the money that's brought into the household. And I wanted to make sure that I had shed my money scarcity, right? Any thoughts about money scarcity that I had, I wanted to make sure that I shed that and didn't pass that on to my kids. But most importantly, I wanted them to understand that if they were going to partner with a woman, that they wanted a partner who truly understood that they had the power, that they didn't have to give up their autonomy, they didn't have to give up their freedom because they didn't understand money. Because when you do not understand how money works, that is in essence what you're doing. You are giving up your power. You are giving up your ability to make choices, and you are giving up your freedom. And I didn't want them to partner with someone who inadvertently was going to do that. That mindset of, oh, he's the man and he gets it. It's so outdated and it's so dangerous. And what I see a lot is that women come to me later in life thinking that their husband was doing either the right thing or they just assumed he knew what he was doing, and come to find out this guy didn't know what he was doing. We just blindly assumed that, as a man, he would know what to do. And now, years later, we found out, he didn't know what he was doing, and nor did he say he didn't know what he was doing. So I just want to touch on some of those facts and figures that I mentioned earlier, because it's so important for women to understand that the money really allows them, and the understanding of how money works really allows them to have choice and power and autonomy in their own lives. So let's talk about a few things and a few situations and circumstances that women find themselves in that money may enable them to make different choices. So the first one I'm going to cover, and I do have a podcast episode on this, is about divorce, okay? Approximately 44% of women fall into poverty after divorce. That's nearly half. It's almost half of women fall into poverty after divorce. And divorcing or separating moms are 2.8 times more likely to be in poverty than those that remain married. So imagine the fact that a divorced woman, almost half of them fall into poverty. And listen, that's 44% of women that fall into poverty after divorce. Have you heard this new term called a gray divorce? A gray divorce is a divorce after the age of 50. 45% of the women who experience a gray divorce the women who experience a gray divorce, their standard of living drops by 45% after the divorce. So your standard of living almost drops, it's cut in half after a divorce after the age of 50. Whereas with men, it only drops by 21%. So imagine the devastation financially that divorce has on women. And I've seen it. I mean, I have divorced women who come to me in crisis. They're in their 40s, they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, and they had to start from scratch. Remember, these are the women that trusted their husbands to handle the money. These are the women that find out that either there's nothing there or that he just flubbed it. This is real. The fear is real. And there's a lot of resentment, and that's real too. And the time lost, you can't get that back. And then there are the women who are stuck. They're trapped in relationships and they want to leave, but they can't leave. And why can't they leave? Because financially they don't have any options. Remember, I said finances provide you with freedom, with autonomy, and with choices. So if you have someone who is completely controlling your finances, that is financial abuse. And it's the main reason why many women stay or return to these types of relationships. Think about it. It may not be the physical abuse. It may not be the emotional abuse. It's the financial control. Because if you don't have money, if you don't have resources, if you don't have the financial literacy, you don't have a way out. And there are women who know right now today, who are out there, who know that they want to leave. They know that they need to leave. but they don't have any way to go about it because they may not have a job, they may not have savings, they may not have credit in their own name, they may have poor credit, they have nowhere to go. And so that abusive partner has destroyed their ability to be independent. Because the financial abuse isn't just about controlling the money. You're controlling that person. You're ensuring that they can never leave. You've got them exactly where you want them. I think the third set of women that I see who come to me, if not in a financial abusive relationship, if not, just recently divorced, are the widows. Women who are recently widowed. And this is across all ages, right? I'm not talking about women who are much older. I've had 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. These are women who suddenly lose their husbands and they realize they don't know squat about what's where and how things have been handled. And sometimes it's they don't know where the accounts are. They don't know if there's life insurance. They thought there was life insurance, but the policy was canceled. They thought there was retirement savings, but there wasn't as much in there because he had borrowed against it. There are all sorts of scenarios that I've seen that women have encountered once their husband has passed. And these women are grieving. And now they're panicking. Because not only do they have to grieve the loss of their partner, but now there's this financial strain that is causing all of this pressure. So I know we're talking about divorce or abuse or widowhood, but fundamentally what I'm talking about here is that every woman needs to be in command of their own money. And it doesn't matter if you're single or you're married or if you're divorced or you're widowed. It doesn't matter because your financial security cannot depend on someone else. You need to figure out how this business of money works. It has to come from you. It has to come from your knowledge, your literacy, your confidence, and your ability to make decisions about your wealth. I think a lot of this is generational as well. That's obvious. Because I see a lot of young women have a completely different approach. And maybe it's because they've listened to their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers, and I strongly support, if you are a young woman, to make sure that you have other women in your life, particularly those that are older than you. The wisdom, right, that you can garner from these women is invaluable. You can't get that in a course. They should have a master class on, being around older women when you're younger, because you will see what you want. You will see what you don't want. You will learn from them, right? And you will get these golden nuggets that are so valuable. And I think that's why younger women don't assume that the guys in their lives know diddly squat about money. I don't think that they believe that, oh yeah, he has to not only support me, but he also has to make sure that I'm taken care of just in case. The younger women are becoming way more financially literate. And it's because they actually want to. They actually want to. I think they've heard some horror stories. That could be part of it. But I think they actually want to. They've decided that this isn't a man's game, right? So they have their own funds. They have their own investment accounts. They have their own ideas about how the money should be made and how it should be managed and how they should build wealth. They have their own ideas, and I love that for them. They're not waiting to be saved, but they're also not waiting to be imprisoned. They're not allowing folks to take away their autonomy. They're not looking for someone to make all the decisions for them, and they're building their own empires. They're doing it themselves, right? They're more than willing to partner with someone, but they want to be an active participant. So they're asking all the questions. These women know what a Roth IRA is. They know what index funds are. Like, they're very, very different. And I love it because someone modeled this financial confidence for them. They talked about money very differently than I did, right? Money for me and everybody around me was about scarcity, not having enough. Money is tough. There's not enough to go around. Oh, it's so hard. I had to shed all of that. I had to unlearn all of that. Everybody around me talked about money that way. But these women don't talk about it like that at all. It's so good. And that's what I want for our daughters as well. Not just the ones who are just, starting in the workplace. I'm talking about the little girls. I want them to hear about this. I want them to just assume that they're going to manage their money. I want them to assume, whether they partner or not, that they are going to be an active participant who can make decisions about what's going to happen with their money. I want them to know that, hey, if this thing doesn't quite work out as planned, this thing called life, they will still be okay financially. That's the kind of language we need to use around our daughters. It's not something you preach, it's something you demonstrate. And I think that it will be so invaluable for them. Because when you have money, you have options. And if the relationship ends, you'll be okay. You won't have to move in with your parents. You won't have to stay in a bad situation because you can't afford to leave. You won't have to panic about how you'll pay for groceries. That's the financial empowerment that we want to give these girls. You shouldn't have to think and decide and choose between poverty and abuse. Okay? You shouldn't have to think, oh my gosh, I want to leave this person. This relationship isn't working out, but I can't because I will be thrown into poverty. No. I want us to speak independence into these women, which is not saying that they won't partner. It's saying that when or if they do, they will still be okay if the relationship doesn't work out. I think it's so important for women to have this financial empowerment so that life's, bumps don't destroy you. I don't believe that you should have a bump in the road and that should throw you into the depths of poverty. I don't believe you should have a bump in the road and suddenly not have any choices. Instead, I think that if you're financially empowered as a woman, you should be able to comfortably negotiate your salary. You should be able to start a business. You should be able to retire with dignity. You should be able to leave a legacy for your kids that isn't just about money, but it's knowledge, it's confidence, it's freedom. I just think that there's a lot of women out there who need to have financial empowerment breathed into them, right? So, so that there's things that and you can confidently say, like, I'm not signing that loan application until I understand every single term in there. I'm putting aside a certain amount of money every single month for my beauty, for my health, for my vacations. I'm going to check my credit card report regularly because I need to make sure that I know what's on there so I'm not blindsided. I need to have my own bank account, my own retirement savings, and my own financial goals, even if I'm married. And I need to understand what's going on in those accounts. I need to be able to invest and build wealth and understand compound interest and use it to my advantage. It is important for you to talk about money openly and confidently and abundantly, and to do it around your children, particularly your daughters, so that they don't even second guess that they will be able to create money in the world and be secure with it on their own. And that doesn't mean you don't get guidance. That doesn't mean you don't get support. That doesn't mean that you don't ask questions. That doesn't mean that you're like just winging it. It means that you have the confidence to even seek out the guidance and the support and the assistance that you need. And it's important to say this about the daughters, but it's also important for you to think about this if you are 45 or 55 or 60 and you're like, well, okay, fine. Maybe I can be able to communicate this to my daughter if I learn it myself, but is it too late for me? And that's the thing. It is never too late. I just did a podcast last week where I was talking about money stages. And I think it's so important for you to understand that the stages of money is far more important than the age. Sure, if you start earlier, the better. I mean, nobody is going to deny you that. The earlier you start, the earlier you start investing, the earlier you begin to understand what's going on in your mind about money, the earlier you're able to shed some of those thoughts of scarcity, the better. But it is equally, if not more important, to be focused on what stage you're at with your money. Because when you understand where you are today, we can then create a plan for you to move to the next stage, and then the next stage, and then the next stage. I'm going to break all of the stages down again, but I would go back and listen to last week's podcast about the money stages, because that is a freeing approach to how you can address where you are with money. Once you get locked into those ages, you feel defeated. And that's why people are like, oh, I'm 45, I'm 55, I'm 65. Is it too late for me? It's like, no, it's not. Where are you in this money journey? Let's figure that out, and then let's move on to the next stage. No more of this perseverating about how old you are and comparing yourself to other people certain age. No. That exercise is only going to keep you stuck. The only thing that's going to change is your age, but your financial situation won't. So instead of being worried about whether or not it's too late, know that you can build wealth at any stage of life. Any stage. You can become financially empowered. You can become financially free. You just have to start right now. I mean, I've been working with my oldest client. I started working with her at 72. And she was starting to build wealth. She started investing. She started a small business. It was crazy how much she did in the 6 short months that we worked together. And she paid off some debt that she'd been carrying almost her entire life and was so ashamed of that debt. It is not too late. It's the stage that you're in. Once you identify that, once you work with me and we talk about it and we move you from that stage to the next, you're on your way. You're on your way. You don't have to worry. You just have to get started. It's never too late to learn. And it's never too late to change the trajectory of your financial future. And back to the daughters. It's never too late to change the nature of the conversation. You can change that conversation in your home right now, right like today. You just got to model something different for them. You have to become financially confident. You have to become financially literate, and you will be able to model that for them. They will see you moving throughout the world, making these types of decisions with confidence, with the knowledge And they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's what you do. Because they're listening. They're watching you all the time. So here's my challenge to you today. First of all, share this podcast with anyone you know who's a woman, okay? Then you can go and share it with anyone you know who has a woman in their life, all right? Share this podcast and start talking about money in your home from a place of abundance and not scarcity. I know it sounds like, oh, that's easy. You would be surprised. Just pay attention to how often you talk about money through a scarcity lens. It's crazy. It pops up all the time. I am still working on it. Always. Always. The slight sentences you say, the thoughts you have. I mean, start talking about money as though it is abundant. Okay? Show your daughters and your sons, you know, I have sons. Show your daughters and your sons that women can and should make as much money as they want. There's no limit to what women can do. And really embrace that. You really have to embrace it. I mean, they'll pick up on it if you don't believe it. And share with them how you make financial decisions. Share your wins, share your strategies, share your losses too. Let them see you negotiate things, any investing you're doing, how you're building wealth. Share everything with them. Let them see you talk about it. Let them hear you talk about money. The shame of money is like, it's all in the secrets. And when we don't talk about money, this is what makes it so challenging. That's why kids can grow up in a middle class home and not know squat about money. And they're like, why didn't anybody teach me any of these things? And it's because we don't talk about it, not even in our own homes. And so what we want to do with our children is especially our daughters, is make sure that they inherit your money mindset, okay? Because they're going to get that long before they get any money you're going to leave for them. Trust me. They are going to get that money mindset. I inherited my parents' money mindset. I had to be very careful and aware of what was I carrying with me? And what was I sharing with my own children? So I had to be really mindful. And if you want to raise financially empowered and confident and free girls who will become financially empowered, confident, and free women, then you've got to speak that into them. You've got to demonstrate that yourself. Because the conversations in the home about money, it's sticky. They're sticky and they have to change, but it starts with you. It starts with you. So look, if you are wondering, how do I go about doing this? I'm ready. I want to learn this. I want to transform not just my finances, but my family's legacy. I want to transform how I'm thinking about money. I want to transform how my money is set up, and I want it to grow. Then I want you to book a call with me. Okay? When you get on the phone with me, you're going to get some real answers about your money. You're going to get some real talk about building wealth. We're going to figure out where you are, what money stage you're in. Doesn't matter how old you are. We're going to talk about the money stage. And, there's going to be no BSing here. We're going to get right to it. And if you're willing to look at where you are right now with some hand holding, I'm not going to throw you to the wolves, with some hand holding and some straight talk, I'm going to show you how you're going to go from middle class to millions. We're going to have a real conversation about money. We're going to talk about your fears. We're going to talk about your goals. We're going to talk about all of it. And we're going to talk about a plan that's personalized to you. Okay? Because you got to feel safe with money. You got to talk about money. You got to feel safe, period. And that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to get to work. Because the objective here is for you to move throughout the stages, for you to build wealth. I want you to be rich. I want you to be rich in knowledge. I want you to be rich in confidence. I want you to be rich in options. I want you to be rich in money. Okay? That's what we're going to do. So get on the call with me. Let's do this. Let's get you set up so that when 2026 comes, you're not floundering. Okay? You're not putting this off. You've decided that this is important for you, for your daughters, for your sons, for your family. It's important. This is what you need to move forward. And you know that angst and that feeling that you've been having about money, this is the way to quell it. All right. I look forward to hearing from you soon. I will be back next week. And let's get this conversation going. All right. Take care.